Investigating Children's Irony Comprehension, the podcast.
Welcome to our podcast episode. Today we are diving into the fascinating topic of teaching children how to understand irony. To this end, we not only conducted a small survey, but also invited an expert in the field of irony research from our student seminar to talk to us. Let's start with an everyday example of irony in action. A mother enters her child's room. Contrary to a previous agreement, the child has not yet tidied his room. The toys are scattered all over the floor. The mother remarks ironically, "You've done a great job tidying up." Situations like these raise an interesting question for us as adults. How well can children understand irony remarks? If we come to the conclusion that there are comprehension problems, how can irony be learned by children, and how can we support them in this? In today's discussion, we will not only look at the survey results, but also examine insights from a 2021 study. Our expert will provide details about the study's findings and explain how they might apply to real-life scenarios.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm excited to dive into this topic. Let's start by taking a look at the result of the survey we conducted on the topic of irony in general and children's understanding of irony in particular. We had 10 questions in total, and a total of 38 people took part in the survey. One of the most fascinating questions was, do you think that children can be trained to understand irony? 27 of our respondents answered this question with yes, 10 people saying no. So clearly, the majority of people seems to imagine that irony comprehension in children can be improved through targeted training.
Thank you for that overview. Naturally, we are curious about what research says on this topic. You've brought along a 2021 study by Lee, Sidhu and Pexman. What are the researchers' findings in this article?
In order to understand irony, we need to be able to empathize with the other persons on different levels. In scientific terms, this cognitive ability is often referred to as theory of mind, which is still developing in children. The study found that children can actually be taught to understand ironic utterances to some extent. They tested 111 children aged 5 to 6 in 3 different phases to test this idea.
Oh, that sounds interesting. For our listeners, could you explain what these phases were?
Yeah, of course. So in the first phase, both groups were shown several puppet shows. The puppet dialogue ended with either an ironic or literal remark. After each interaction, the children were asked to evaluate the speaker's intent, attitude, and humor. In the second phase, the children in the training group were given an explicit explanation by the researchers of what irony was and were given tips on what they could look out for in order to recognize it. Meanwhile, the control group read a non-ironic picture book with the researchers. In a third phase of experiment, the children's understanding of irony was tested again and compared using further puppet shows.
Okay, and what did the results show?
Interestingly, the findings showed that children who struggled with the irony initially showed significant improvement in identifying the speaker's attitude and intent after the training. Even though they could identify the attitude and intent, their understanding of the humor behind the irony did not improve.
That's really intriguing. So all children need to do in order to get better at understanding irony is to practice thinking about how language works. It's really interesting to hear that children's ability to understand irony is developing at this age, tied to their evolving theory of mind. The study shows that while children can improve their ability to recognize a speaker's attitude and intention with some training, it's clear that this is part of a broader developmental process. It's a reminder of how complex and gradual this kind of cognitive growth really is. What advice can we offer to people who interact with children regularly, whether in personal or professional contexts, and still want to use irony effectively?
It's important to keep in mind that understanding irony can be challenging for children because their cognitive and social abilities, like theory of mind, are still developing. This means they might not always pick up on the cues adults consider obvious. For example, even when using changing in tone of voice or clear contextual hints, children might still misunderstand the intended meaning. So the best approach is to be kind and patient. If children don't understand irony right away, it's not a failure. It's a part of their developmental journey. When children seem to have trouble understanding irony, we could explain or rephrase when needed. Like this, it is important to be kind and empathic to their pace of development.
Thanks for that. That brings us to the end of today's discussion. Let's quickly revisit the key points we covered. We've seen that while irony is a complex form of communication, there is evidence that children's ability to understand it can improve with guidance and metalinguistic training. This highlights the potential for supporting their developing skills in recognizing non-literal language. However, we also recognize that fully grasping the nuances of irony, such as humor recognition, remains a challenge for children. This reminds us that their understanding is part of a gradual developmental process. Thank you for that, and thank you for being with us today. And a big thanks to our listeners. We'll see you in the next episode where we will discuss whether culture impacts irony comprehension.
Investigating Children's Irony Comprehension, the podcast.